much. Let's turn to another deadline now, looming in the case of hundreds of highly sensitive documents found at Donald Trump's estate in Florida. The former president's legal team and the Justice Department have until Friday to figure out the duties and limitations of the special master and submit suggestions on who should fulfill that role. On Labor Day, a judge granted Trump's request for the independent third party who will oversee the handling of the evidence collected from Mar-a-Lago. Brian Greer is a former lawyer for the CIA who specialized in national security investigations. Michael Moore is a former U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Georgia. Gentlemen, welcome back. Brian, let me start with you. And you say that this judge's decision has now created a Wild West atmosphere. Explain that.
Yeah, it's important to keep in mind we are in a civil proceeding right now where Donald Trump is trying to use a civil case to attack an ongoing criminal investigation. There are no procedures in place by law for how classified information is going to be handled in this litigation. In criminal litigation, there's a statute called the Classified Information Procedures Act, which is very well established. There's no corollary in civil litigation. And so when it comes time to presenting this information before the special master, potentially letting witnesses access this information, writing briefs about this information, storing this information, go on and on down the list, it is a little bit of the Wild West in that there aren't procedures in place for how this is going to work from a classification perspective.
Michael, on the point of if the Justice Department will be able to use these documents, the judge says, at least until the special master is done, that's a no. The implications of not being able to use them, does that mean they cannot continue with potential witnesses they found relevant from these documents? They can't go along the secondary, tertiary steps of investigating these? How broad is use?
Well, I'm glad to be with you. I really think that it may be much ado about nothing, because hopefully the department had enough sense to go ahead and know that they had sufficient evidence before they did the search. I mean, we already know about classified documents and materials that they claim were present from February through August, because you see this back and forth correspondence with the Trump camp about, is there enough there? What are you going to do? Put another lock on, this type of thing. And some statements made from people on the inside. So they probably have enough just to go ahead, and this may be the case where it's almost like playing chicken with the other side. They may want to go ahead and just issue a quick indictment if that's what they were going to do. Hopefully that decision was reached long before we got to this place. But they may not be able to question people about the contents of the specific documents that they're looking at now until the special master gives a clearance in case there's some privileged information. And that's a whole nother can of worms, whether it's attorney-client versus executive privilege. But they should have had enough information to early on. And I'm a little troubled to hear their response that this is the investigations in the early stages. You should have never gone into a former president's house with an investigation in the early stages. This is something where you would have typically had enough information to charge. You decided you were going to do the search warrant. You got some information from the search warrant, then you move on to the grand jury. Not that you somehow use this as a fishing expedition or whatever. And that's, I'm afraid, the picture that's being painted by some of their claims about how they may be harmed through the special master decision.
So you suggest that because this is not something that you do early on, that all these questions about whether there will be charges, if they have enough to charge, they're far beyond that.
I would hope so. I mean, I can't imagine a scenario where a prosecutor in a case like this, and we are in uncharted waters. I mean, let's talk about that. But it would be hard for me to imagine that somebody somewhere from the Attorney General on down would have approved a search warrant on a former president's home without already thinking and having a discussion like, if we find X, are we going to go ahead and charge? What do we have that may be sufficient to charge? Because this is not a, we're not talking about going in and looking for missing food stamps or something. We're talking about a situation where they're going into to new territory that could have massive implications. And the problem with where they are is that the judge has now opened up this idea of executive privilege. So now suddenly that something was fairly well settled about the privilege belonging to the current president. Now is that going to be relitigated? So this has caused a little bit of a kerfuffle that they could nip in the bud if they just went ahead and did a quick indictment on what they had and not rely solely on the information they received from the search.
Brian, does this judge's decision to prevent the DOJ from using these documents while the special master does his or her work impact the ongoing assessment from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence at all?
I believe it could impact aspects of that review that's going on with the ODNI right now. If you're an intelligence professional and you're looking at this document, getting the document is super helpful. But then you're going to have a lot of questions. It's critical to know who accessed, when, why, how, under what circumstances. You're going to want to ask the FBI those questions. They can't do that right now. Hopefully those conversations already took place before the order came out, and so maybe the intelligence community has what they need to complete their assessment. But that's very, very critical that the intelligence community get that information. If I were the Justice Department right now, I'd be thinking of ways that I could make a better argument before the court through declarations from the FBI or the ODNI saying that we know you've split the baby this way, but it just can't work that way. These two investigations are going hand in hand.
Michael, they've got a list of to-dos by Friday. They've got to determine the duties of this a special master, the potential candidates, the schedule, how much this person will be paid. Considering how much this has been politicized, you think that's possible over the next 3 or 4 days?
No, I don't think it is. And anybody who's ever seen two parents divorce and try to figure out where the kids are going to spend the Christmas holiday, that's about where you're at now. And that is, both sides have their lines drawn in the sand. I think it's going to be very, very hard for the department to come to some agreement on the duties of the special master, especially since we now are talking about the executive privilege issue within that. So, for instance, they're going to agree that that the special master can review for executive privilege document. Well, that would seem then to waive arguments they may make later. So I think it's going to be tough. Picking a person shouldn't be hard because that's just somebody that has the classification levels, security clearance levels to look at this kind of information. But defining those duties, I think, is probably going to involve some further intervention by the court. At the same time, the department may consider appealing this up to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. They may be so dissatisfied with how the baby was split that they want a different ruling, or at least to say, tell this judge that they want the Court of Appeals to tell this judge that attorney-client privilege is one thing, but getting into executive privilege and allowing a special master to make those determinations is against sort of our settled law and principles.
All right, deadline is Friday to answer some of those questions from the judge. Michael Moore, Brian Greer, appreciate it.